Colour pencils are expensive, and the most expensive part of drawing with them is the colour pencils themselves. So I want to take a look at a more affordable option. We're going to take a look at these Brutfuner pencils. What I've got here is a set of 120 pencils, and these are the square Brutfuner pencils. These are oil-based pencils, so kind of similar to polychromos, but they are a fraction of the price of the polychromos. Let's see if these pencils can come anywhere close, because if they can, they're an absolute bargain. The first thing I wanted to do when I got the pencils was open it up and have a look. There's this very nice colourful sleeve here. I'm going to take that off first, and then underneath that you can see that it's a metal black tin, and it's just got the Brutfuner logo printed on it, so it does look quite nice and smart. When I opened up the tin, I was very pleased to see that there is a swatch sheet in here. You don't normally get swatch sheets like this with pencils. Sometimes you get printed ones, but I don't find them that helpful because the colours don't tend to be the same as the printout. So very handy that we've got one here ready to fill in. From here, I took a look underneath the swatch sheet, and all of the pencils are sorted into 3 layers. And as you can see, they're all sorted by colour, which is very handy, so I don't have to do that myself. As for the actual pencils, as you can see, they are square. And the main thing that I thought when I first saw them was, I wonder how these are going to sharpen. We'll have to investigate that. But as for what's on the pencils, the actual colour name is written in Chinese, and then it's also got a colour number. So that's fine, I can work with that. As long as there's some sort of marking on the pencils so I can tell them apart, then that's all I'll need for my swatches. Before I start drawing with these, I did want to just work out how I'm going to sharpen them. The first thing I did was see if the pencil will fit in my swordfish pencil sharpener, which is my main go-to pencil sharpener. And as you can see, because of the square edges, it doesn't fit. I also have this much smaller little Faber-Castell pencil sharpener, but it doesn't fit in there either. Now, luckily, a little while ago, I saw this pencil sharpener in a clearance bin and thought I'll pick it up just in case. This one has a standard sized hole and a slightly larger hole. So I tried it in there, and thankfully it works perfectly. So just bear in mind with these pencils that you do need a slightly larger pencil sharpener than a standard one. It's not particularly an issue, it's just something to bear in mind. Good. Now that I've worked out how to sharpen them, we can actually draw something. What I'm going to draw to start with is swatches, but I'm not going to use the swatch sheet that came with the set of pencils. The one with the set does actually feel like decent quality paper, but I like to do my swatches on the actual paper I'm going to draw on. So I'm going to do my swatches on Bristol board. I use swatching not only so that I can see what the actual colour looks like on my piece of paper, but also it's a really good opportunity to get to know the pencils. It's a good way to see how the pencils perform when I press hard or when I press more lightly, and generally see how it feels to hold the pencil in my hand. Because they're oil based, I'm expecting them to have quite a hard lead and feel quite firm while I put them down. I'm not expecting them to feel super soft and super creamy. So I'm going to draw out my grid and get swatching. I was immediately surprised by these pencils. You could definitely be forgiven for thinking that they are wax-based, because they do feel soft and creamy, which was not what I expected. I also immediately noticed how vibrant they are. Now, I did notice that the odd pencil does feel a little bit scratchy. That said, this isn't the first pencil set I've had this happen with. When I first got my set of luminance pencils, which are far more expensive pencils, there was one pencil in my set that also just felt really scratchy. And I thought maybe it was just a bad pencil, so I bought a replacement pencil, and the replacement was the same as well. So I assume sometimes the pigment makes them feel a bit more grainy. But as I say, it's only 2 or 3 pencils in this set that feels like that. As I was getting towards the end, I noticed here that there is a number of colours that are remarkably similar. For example, if you look at these couple of greens here, they are mildly different, but they're very much colours that I could substitute out for each other. Now Brutfuner could have made a smaller set, and there is a number of them that I wouldn't be bothered if they were missing. That said, these similar colours isn't necessarily a bad thing, and here's why. Almost all professional grade artist pencils are what's called open stock. This means that you can not only buy them in sets, but you can also buy individual pencils. So if you wear down your light grey completely, then you can just go buy a new light grey pencil. You won't have to rebuy everything. These Brutfuner pencils are not open stock, so if you completely wear down a pencil, you would have to buy a whole new tin to replace that pencil. This is where I think it's a good thing that a few colours are quite similar. Because with those pinks, for example, if I was to completely use one, then it doesn't matter. There is a very similar pink right next to it. So it is just going to delay how frequently I have to buy a new tin. So although they probably could have left all of those very similar colours out, I don't think it's the end of the world. Now, before I can really say if these pencils are worth using, they need to be put through some tests. I have been racking my brain to try and think of all of the tests that I would want to put pencils through, thinking about all the different techniques I use for my drawings. So I have a plan, let's draw it out. These are the tests that I've come up with, so let's work through them one by one and I'll explain to you what I'm doing as I go. So the first test I did was the solid colour test. I just want to see to start with if it's possible to get down smooth coverage with the pencil. So I did this with just the one colour, just red, and I built it up slowly in layers. It built up quite nice and quickly. You can see straight away, even with the first light layers, how vibrant the colour looks. And by the time that I've built up a few layers and blended it all together and burnished it, it is looking really nice and smooth. Through doing this test though, I did notice something about the pencils that I didn't pick up on earlier. When I sharpened them, they don't always sharpen perfectly evenly. If you take a look at this pencil here, you'll see that it looks kind of thicker on this side, it's a bit wider, and then when I turn the pencil, it looks much thinner here. The pencil does also flake away quite easily. Again, as you can see here, it seems to be quite a soft core. Next up, I just wanted to do a simple gradient. So I wanted to see how the colours blend between similar colours. So I'm going to blend here between a yellow, orange, and then onto red. I built up this gradient gradually. I started on the left with the lightest colour and then worked along to the orange and red, and then I went back again. And it all has blended together quite nicely. I wouldn't say that I found it particularly difficult to control. It all performed how I would expect it to based on what I learned from the colour pencils on the solid colour test. I found very similar on the complementary gradient test. This is using two colours on the opposite end of the colour wheel, just because it's going to make it a bit easier to see how they blend together in the middle. And once again, I would say that my findings were very similar to the simple gradient. It blended quite well together. I wouldn't say perfectly, but I think it blended well from one colour into another. The next thing I wanted to know was how these pencils would work with solvents. So I just wanted to put some colour down here and build up a number of layers. I needed to make sure that I had a decent amount of pencil that the solvent could blend. And then I used Zest-It to blend it with a cotton bud. This test wasn't very exciting, to be honest. It did perform exactly how I expected it to, based on what I know from Polychromos and Prismacolor. But it is something to tick a box. You should never use solvents on a pencil without testing them out first. Now, before I carry on with the tests, I just wanted to see how the craft knife would work with these pencils. I sometimes use the craft knife to scrape away some layers of pencil if I want to add in some details, and I generally use it for things like hair. I have found, particularly with Polychromos, that it doesn't work as well as it does with Prismacolor. I'm just doing this patch on the solid colour block at the top, just so it'd be really easy to see the results. And I would say that this works as well as it does on Prismacolor, which is quite a surprise when these are oil-based like Polychromos. Now at the bottom here, I'd left myself 6 little rectangles, and what I wanted to do is pick out the most vibrant primary and secondary colours. And I was able to hold these up to my Polychromos swatches to see how vibrant they are in comparison. Now they do almost look as vibrant. There is something about the Polychromos though that somehow just looks a bit richer. Now that might be because it's a slightly different shade, obviously, but the colours just look a bit more substantial in the polychromos. I wanted to move on and test how good these pencils are with fine detail. So I just drew out a little lock of hair. Now, as I always do with colour pencils, I started with the lightest colour here and worked my way up to the darkest. It did get a little bit frustrating here that I wasn't able to keep a sharp point on the pencil, as I mentioned earlier, and really the main way that I went about creating this was by frequently sharpening. Now this is obviously going to wear down the pencils faster, and I would only keep sharpening this much if I was drawing something that did need a lot of detail, like hair for example. Something that did surprise me as I worked my way towards the darker colours is that it did become harder to layer the colours up. As I got to the deep brown, for example, the colour when I put it on top of the previous layers wasn't as deep as it was on the swatches. So I did have to put in a bit of black and then put more brown over the top of it just to deepen that all down. Now it's not a major issue, it just means I had to work a bit differently to what I'm used to. I was able to still add in some of the baby hairs around the edge though, and it was nice that I was able to use the craft knife to add in some further details. So now let's go through some of the details of the pencil and give them some ratings. So as far as the size of the colour range, this range has 120 pencils. That is as many as the full set of polychromos pencils. So there is a good variety of all of the primary and secondary colours, as well as a goodly amount of browns and greys, which is always nice to see. As far as price goes, they are a more affordable set of pencils. So in the UK, you can buy them on Amazon for $24.99, or I can find them in the US for $30. That works out to be 21p per pencil or 25 cents. So they are far cheaper than professional artist pencils. As far as the quality goes, most of the pencils do feel very nice to put on the paper. As I mentioned, they are nice and creamy. Now I have factored into my quality score that they are affordable. So I'm going to give them a 6 out of 10. That is mostly because the core is quite crumbly when you sharpen it, and you do need a specific pencil sharpener. You can't just buy your standard pencil sharpener. I have given them a 6 though because of how nice they feel on the paper. For the packaging, I'm going to give them 8 out of 10. The tin is very nice. It feels almost as good quality as some of the more premium brands. I think my only real issue here is that when you take a pencil out, a lot of the other pencils do tend to move to fill in the gap. It's quite easy to let them shift over, which is only really an issue because I like to keep the pencils in the same order as the swatches, or it gets very hard to find the ones I need, specifically with such a large set. Last thing here is light fast, which is how fast the pencils fade under museum style conditions. Now for this, I'm just going to put NA because they don't claim that the pencils are light fast and they haven't been tested as far as I'm aware. So do bear in mind that what you draw may fade in time. I would say that I am a mixture of surprised and not surprised by these pencils. On one hand, they are really nicely pigmented. The colours are really vivid. Also, they do feel really nice and creamy as I'm putting them down. On the other hand, trying to get a sharp point doesn't really work out, and if you do manage to get one, it does go quite quick. But it didn't stop me from still creating some fine detail in this drawing. So I would say that it has some of the quality issues that you would expect from a budget pencil, but I can kind of forgive it for the price. If you want to check them out for yourself, I have a link below in the description. I've quite enjoyed trying these tests on these pencils, and I think I want to do some more. I think it'd be cool if I took 4 budget pencils and put them against each other head to head. And then we can crown the king of the budget pencil. Let me know in the comments below if there's any specific pencils you'd like to see me use for this budget challenge. And don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you get notified about the video. Alright, happy drawing guys, I'll see you in the next one.